Hey folks, welcome back. So as promised in my channel update video, we're going to start doing my tribute to Doctor Who, the BBC science fiction franchise. It's been going now for 6 decades, celebrating its 60th anniversary this year. I'll have to admit my coverage will extend a little bit into the new year, into the 61st anniversary, but that's because I have some more stuff for the Doctor Who role-playing line coming to me under the Christmas tree. And so some of those videos will probably not come out until January. But in the meantime, I'll show you what I do have. And here we're going to start with where things began. So the first editions of the game, there was a 10th Doctor edition, I believe, before this one. This is the 11th Doctor edition. So you can see Matt Smith. He's the 11th person to play Doctor Who in the last 60 years. We have some well-known enemies skirting the edges here, the Daleks, the Cybermen, the Weeping Angels, etc. Amy Pond, who is his companion in the 11th Doctor's series. And the game, which is called, so you can see, Doctor Who Adventures in Time and Space, the role-playing game. Quite a bit of a mouthful of a title, but they eventually shortened it. It comes in this wonderful box set, which is not a starter set. It's actually everything you need to play the game, which is fantastic. So we'll take a quick look at the back. You can see, with Doctor Who Adventures in Time and Space, the power is in your hands. You can go anywhere in the universe at any point in time. It's not going to be easy. It'll probably be dangerous. The universe is a hostile place full of Daleks, Atraxi, Santarans, Cybermen, Sycorax, Judoons, Weeping Angels, and worse. There'll be fear, heartbreak, and excitement, but above all, it'll be the trip of a lifetime. So Doctor Who is a role-playing game in which you experience a universe of adventure as the Doctor, his companions, or new characters that you create. And so inside we have the Player's Guide, Game Master's Guide, Adventure Book, Quick Start Guide, pre-gen character sheets, including pre-gen characters for the series cast, tokens, and dice. And it says it appeals to both the experienced and first-time gamers. The game is suitable for 2 or more players aged 10 to 900 plus. That's a reference to the Doctor himself being over 900 years old at this time in the franchise history with the 11th Doctor. His age is kind of hard to determine in a way because he jumps around time and space so much and his time stream is all screwed up, but that's the best estimate we can manage. So we'll take a look inside. First of all, you can see you get loads of these story point tokens. They originally, of course, came unpunched in a big sheet, but they were punched so well that they start falling out basically immediately. Story points are the main kind of currency in the game that you use to power your devices and your various abilities and things. And the way that they attempt to balance the powers of the Doctors versus their companions is by giving the companions more story points, which allows them to be a little bit more flexible in the heat of disaster. But it doesn't fully work like that, so you will have to have, I think, a relatively mature playing group or a group that knows the franchise really well, and they're able to trust somebody to be the Doctor and not dominate play. So story points, you need a lot of these. That's why they give you this big sheet full of them. Then we get our Read This First How to Play sheet, which you would find in a typical starter set. So it explains to you what an RPG is, what's a game master, the rules in a nutshell, picking a character. So it breaks down the character sheet for you. So the pre-gens come in this lovely format here. Your characters have 6 different attributes: awareness, coordination, ingenuity, presence, and resolve, which are all explained on the left side here. They have traits. They give your character a little bit of special abilities and special flavors. They can modify your actions in certain circumstances, so they give you modifiers when you use your certain abilities, basically. And then you have your skills. So there are 12 of those: athletics, convince, craft, fighting, knowledge, marksman, medicine, science, subterfuge, survival, technology, and transport. And you can see the Doctor himself has quite decent values, especially in knowledge, science, technology, transport, etc. But he's not much of a marksman because he doesn't like to kill things or shoot things. And his ingenuity is a 9, so he's incredibly strong on anything to do with his cleverness. And then he's got 8 story points available. So at the beginning of the game, Game Master will give each player a token for each story point they have, and you can spend them to add extra dice to your roll if you really need to succeed at something, or to ensure that you succeed when you failed. Story points can also be used to tweak the world to aid you, heal wounds you've received, ensure that there's a handy bit of wire you need to fix a machine in your pocket, etc. If you just do something brave and play true to your character, like playing up a bad trait, the Game Master can award you extra story points. And then, of course, in the rules, there'll be a lot more on that. Then we have a character description section where we have the personal goals of the character, their general personality, and their background. And at the bottom, you have the tech level. So that determines the levels of technology you're most familiar with. And different items, different gadgets will have different levels of tech. And if you're trying to use a piece of tech outside of your level of familiarity, then that could incur some penalties or other difficulties for you. And then we have on the back the very basic rules. So you take your attribute value plus your skill, plus any trait that applies. You take those 2 values, or potentially more if you have some traits that apply. Then you roll 2 6-sided dice and get a result, and you try to match or beat the difficulty of the task, which is set by the Game Master. And that's really it. And then if you spend some story points, you can add dice to your roll, and the difficulty can be anything from 3 to 33 or higher, but a normal action has a difficulty of about 12. The Game Master will have a list of suggested difficulties in the adventures and stuff like that. Or if you go off in your own direction, they'll have to estimate roughly how difficult a certain task will be. Then you also have contested rolls. So So basically, if you're trying to shoot someone and they were trying to dodge you, for example, they would roll first, and whatever they do using the same basic rule, whatever their result is, would then be the difficulty you have to beat to shoot them. So very, very simple. And that's really all you need to know to get started. And it's a lovely system like that, in that the basic rules are easy, but there's enough going on in the character sheets to really differentiate the characters pretty well when you add in the traits, the attributes, the skills, and of course the different gear and capabilities they'll accumulate over the course of the game. And then it tells you to sort of get started straight away with these rules and jump right into one of the adventures, deal out the character sheets, give out story point counters, and give it a go. But basically they recommend that you read the player's guide first at least, and that'll prepare you for anything that could really happen in the game. And then the Game Master has the larger Game Master's Guide that expands on everything and gives them all the ingredients to create new adventures, invent new aliens, villains, and guide them through the intricacies of time travel. So there you go. So it really is a complete game in a box, and it comes with these transparent dice here. So we've got 6d6, and you can see they've got that translucent plastic with TARDIS blue dots, which is nice and thematic, I think. Those are quite lovely. And then we have our books inside here. So we've got first the player's guide. Forgive the reflections, it's just going to be on the glossy covers here. We have the, you can see the thickness there, the player's guide. I think it's about 64 pages, 96 pages, something like that. And then we have the Game Master's Guide, which is much thicker, lots more background info and advice for rules, adjudication, building adventures, and so on. And then we have our pre-gen characters, and there are also some blank character sheets as well. So we've got the 11th Doctor himself, as we saw in the example there in the quick start guide. We have Amy Pond, the companion. You can see she's got more story points at 12 compared to the 8 for the Doctor, but her skill values are much lower in general, right? She's got 3 ingenuity instead of 9. She's a normal person, right? The Doctor is definitely not a normal person. He's 900 years old, traveled throughout time and space, and has a huge amount of familiarity with alien tech and so on. She does come with some stuff, a mobile phone, handcuffs, and police uniform, but again, nothing to compare with a sonic screwdriver, psychic paper, and the remodeled TARDIS. She's got a few traits, but again, the Doctor has many, many more. So if there's one stumbling block in this game, it's just deciding at the beginning whether you want the Doctor to be a GMPC, so that nobody has to argue about it. If you want the Doctor to be a PC, played by somebody you trust, and everybody else is the companions, or whether you want to do something totally different. There are source books that I'll show you in future videos where you can play as members of organizations that help the Doctor, but don't necessarily work directly with him all the time. So you can tell stories in the same universe, but doing totally different things, and I think that's really a cool way to go as well. We got Rory, so his personal goal is keep Amy safe, and he's got his various skill values. He's a little bit better when it comes to some of the physical skills. You know, Amy's got a 0 in fighting, whereas Rory has a 2. So he's a little bit better at the whole keeping people safe thing, but he doesn't have much in the way of stuff, at least on these pre-gen sheets. Then we've got River Song, who of course is a major part of the storyline for the 11th Doctor, which I will not spoil for you. She has some cool stuff as well. So she's got the Blue Diary full of spoilers, 51st Century Sonic Blaster, Damage L. She's got a data pad and hallucinogenic lipstick. She can also take a vortex manipulator, which is a sort of cheap and nasty way of time travel, as the Doctor calls it, by reducing her story point total by a further 6, which would take it to 0. Alternately, she may take the future sonic screwdriver instead by reducing her story point total by 3. So that's quite interesting. A little bit of flexibility there. Then we have Craig Owens. So he was a character appearing in one of the episodes and stuff. He's got nothing. Not a sausage. I love that. And I love that he's here. He's just a normal guy that the Doctor lived with for a bit. And then we have some generic people as well. So this is a unit soldier. Unit being a kind of secretive human group that occasionally helps the Doctor and deals with alien threats and so forth. And there's a whole supplement for them. We have a generic scientist, who could also be perhaps a useful ally to the Doctor. We've got a rock star, so they're more into their presence, you know, convincing people rather than fighting. We have an adventuring archaeologist, so they've got even stats across the board, which is interesting, and they have stuff that resembles a certain guy whose name is Jones, but yeah. We have a footballer, so you have some special abilities here. You get a +2 on all athletics and knowledge rolls pertaining to football. And he's got a team uniform, and he's got cleats, so he can kick for damage of strength +2, and strength being 5. So that's pretty cool. And he's got some useful traits. He's quite good at fighting and athletics, as you might expect. Who else we got? We got a politician. So they really give you quite a few characters to choose from and personalize for yourself here, which is great. You've got the main cast, and then you could also be a general alien who is a shapeshifter. Okay, that's interesting. And they got a 7 for coordination, which is quite impressive. 3 in athletics, 5 in subterfuge, which goes well with shapeshifting. And you get a +2 to your marksman rolls when you catch your target unaware. It's handy. Then we have the blank character sheets as well. So if you want to go and create your own characters using these lovely thick cardstock sheets, then there's a whole bunch of them here. You can see that. So they really did not skimp on giving you the ingredients you need. And then on top of that, we've got some cards for key items. Those of you who know the show will be familiar with these. We've got the Sonic Blaster. So this is used by River Song. We've got the data pad, the Doctor's Sonic Screwdriver, and you can see it has how many story points it takes to activate. And each of them has traits, things they can do. So for example, the Sonic Screwdriver can open and close things, cannot open deadlock seals, and has tricky controls. It can scan, transmit, and weld. The Vortex Manipulator can do short temporal jumps only. It can scan, transmit, teleport, or enter the Vortex special. It takes 7 story points to use though. We've got our hallucinogenic lipstick, which is of course one of River Song's major tricks. Got the psychic paper. So this is what the Doctor shows to people to convince them he's got credentials for being places he's not supposed to be. Basically, it shows the viewer whatever the viewer wants to see. So if they're expecting a certain credential, then they will see it on this psychic paper. We've got the Future Sonic Screwdriver. We've got the Blue Diary, which is the time diary for River Song. We've also got electronic lockpicks. We've got the Engineer's Mate, which is kind of a futuristic Swiss Army knife. We have an engram eraser, which can be used to erase memories, and a rear view scanner. So it allows you to see invisible creatures and identify them, but only when viewed in the attached mirrors. So it has a special ability to reveal invisible entities, and it only works when you're looking at the reflection. Then we have a whole bunch of blank gadget cards. A little bit stuck together, so I'm going to be careful. There we go. So again, you can write up some more gadgets from the other books in the line and use these official cards for them, or you can make your own, which is really cool. And then right here at the back, we have the Adventures book. So this you can kind of jump right into. I'm not going to spoil it for you. And we've got, looks like 2 ready-made adventures. So we have Night of the Comet. This takes the players back in time to foil the actions of a villainous with a history-bending agenda and a group of knights with enhanced abilities from the stars. And then we have Ashes of the Daleks. Takes the players on an abandoned space station, one of a series of watchtowers on the edge of human space. Here they encounter one of the Doctor's most implacable foes. The final part of the book features a bundle of short adventure ideas that game masters can then expand into adventures of their own. So that's great. And then you'll also have lists of things to do. So these are plot goals the characters should try to accomplish in each adventure. You'll have action scenes like chases, difficult tests of skill in extreme circumstances, or battles with alien enemies. And then there'll be a list of ways you can spin off from the concepts of these adventures and seeds, and even spin them out into whole story arcs. So that's pretty cool. Again, it's a really comprehensive set. There's lots of stats for all the enemies and various NPCs that you'll encounter. Everything nicely split up into scenes, plenty of guidance for the GM, back stories and secret plans for everybody that the GM will need to know. And there's really quite a lot to this, actually, with 2 full adventures in here. And the Daleks are such a wonderful classic nemesis for the Doctor, so it seems fantastic to include them in an introductory adventure. Really gives you into the feel of the franchise. Again, we'll just take a look at what they offer. We can see some location maps. We've got stats for a virus. That's interesting. Some Daleks. Dealing with the Daleks. And then ideas on continuing the campaign. And then we have our adventure seeds here in the back. So some of them involve Napoleon, the fall of the gods, early days of the Islamic Empire, all kinds of stuff going on here. Continued all the way to the back. So that's pretty cool. And as you can see, like I say, it's a really complete set here. They don't, you can buy this box and have plenty to play for months and months before you need to think about any supplements, really. But while we're here, we will take a quick look through the player's guide and the game master's guide. I'm not going to do super in-depth reviews of the stuff because I think, the mechanics are relatively simple, and that's one of the reasons why, as I say on the back, it's a pretty good game both for the novice role player and the experienced role player. The 2d6 plus attribute plus skill is reminiscent of something like Traveler, which a lot of old-time gamers will be familiar with, or Star Trek Last Unicorn Games, for example. A lot of them use this basic system. The story points adds a bit of narrative flair to the game, which appeals more to modern role players, and the fact that, basically the game is inherently built to encourage non-violent and creative solutions to problems, which is the Doctor's whole thing. He doesn't want to kill anyone. That makes it a really different role-playing experience, so it is quite new and interesting to play, even if it seems quite simple at first glance. And as I say, the variance of traits and abilities and attributes between characters does make for quite a lot of differences in terms of play. So of course they give you an example of play as we'd often see in an introductory game. Then we have some examples of, advice will be in these blue circles. Supplemental info like optional rules or further detail or play examples will be in these gray boxes. And then we have data tables with headings like this when needed. And we have an introduction to who the Doctor is, the Time Lords, which is the race that he originally came from, who used to be from the planet of Gallifrey, but he's the last remaining Time Lord. The TARDIS, of course, stands for the time and relative dimension in space, and it's known for being much bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. So that's one of its key qualities. It looks like a old-style police phone box from London, which I don't know if they even use anymore. Don't think they do. And the TARDIS used this form as a way to blend in on Earth during the Doctor's travels and got kind of stuck, it seems. And now this is just the way it looks. But when you open the door and you enter the police box, it's absolutely enormous inside. There's pools, bedrooms, multiple bathrooms, everything you could possibly need. Now it says as well to note here that there are many, many years of adventures to cover for Doctor Who, and of course there are many other supplements that help you do that. But the rules are straightforward enough that if you want to just create new things, it's really easy to do so, and I think that I would agree with that assessment. So, who can you play? This is the interesting question. So, is it going to be the Doctor and companions? So that would be resembling the show, basically. So you could play the pre-gen characters from the 11th Doctor series that are in the box already, or you could create a new Doctor and new companions, which is talked about here. And there's some advice here about who gets to play the Doctor. So, you need somebody who has certain dramatic flair, but also they might get a lot more of a spotlight being the Doctor, and that could make other players feel bad. So you might want to do things like having rotating positions for who plays the Doctor. There are various different solutions presented here. Or you could have no Time Lord at all. So you could be rogue time agents, members of UNIT, alien explorers, or just plucky humans, robots, or colonists, rebels, or soldiers. Possibilities are endless, and you might encounter the Doctor and his companions along the way, but that doesn't mean that they have to be who you play. You could be any number of other types of people. And that's why they gave us all those more generic human and humanoid character sheets in the box, as well as the blank ones that you can use to make whatever you like. Then they give you the rules for character creation. So you start with 24 points and you use those to purchase attributes and traits. And it says we recommend you spend 18 points on attributes and save 6 for traits. And you can gain additional character points by taking some bad traits. So that's similar to what you find in other games like, for example, Champions, where you get points back to spend on your character if you take some disadvantages, which is usually makes it a more interesting character as well. Attributes is giving you an indication of how smart and how strong and how charming, etc. somebody is. And then so you're limited to a maximum of 6 in each when you're creating a character to start with. You can't have an attribute at 0, so when attributes reach 0, then the character is incapacitated, so you can't start in that state. You have to have at least 1 in everything. But, depending on how you spread those points, you create very different characters. So it talks about each of these attributes in detail: awareness, coordination, ingenuity, etc. You can also underbuy your character attributes. So your average person on the street will have attributes range from 2 to 3, with 3 being the normal. So if you prefer a character that's really normal and not slightly above average like the Doctor's usual companions, you can opt to save more of the points for later and spend those on traits instead. So you just have these 24 points. You can spend them however you like, which gives you a lot of flexibility. And then we have info about traits. So we have different levels of traits. Minor traits cost a single character point to purchase, or provide you with a point if they're a bad minor trait. Major traits cost 2 character points, or provide 2 points if they're bad. Special traits, so these are the abilities to do superhuman things, cost character points, and sometimes some of your story points as well. Some special traits are for aliens and not for your average character, so they're only covered in the Game Master's Guide. So not available to regular folk. But yeah, so you can purchase traits sometimes more than once. Generally, they're marked with an asterisk if you can do that. Opposing traits can't be purchased because they'll cancel each other out. So if you have something like technically adept and inept, you can't be both because they cancel each other out, so that would be pointless. Some opposing traits can be purchased, however, because they don't quite interfere with each other, so you could be both lucky and unlucky, meaning that your luck is extreme in either case. Brave can be purchased along with a phobia, because you could be brave in the case of everything except, say, spiders. And then we have a list of traits to follow. So we've got a master traits list with some good traits, bad traits, and special traits. And these really run the gamut. I mean, you can be simple things like attractive, give you a +2 bonus to any role that involves their stunning good looks, which includes charming their way past guards or convincing reluctant bureaucrats to cut a bit of red tape. We've got animal friendship, +2 modifier to presence and convince skill rolls when dealing with animals. With a fantastic result, the animal, even a trained guard dog, may adopt the character as the new master. We've got boffin, which is a major good trait. So this allows your character to create gadgets through the fine art of jiggery pokery. There you go. Jiggery pokery being one of my favorite Anglo terms as an American. We've got brave, charming, empathic, facing the crowd. So this is actually a minor good trait. Doesn't sound that great, but it means you can kind of blend in really easily. It makes it easier for you to use subterfuge skills. You've got fast healing. You could have friends, and this can be bought as either minor or major. So a minor friend would be like a reliable source of information or limited aid, like a local cop or something like that. If they have a major trait, they'd be somebody serious, like the Queen or the PM or, the members of UNIT or something like that. You can also have hypnosis, is an interesting one as well, because it can be minor, major, or a special. So the minor gives a +2 bonus to any social interaction to calm someone down or get them to do what you'd like. The major trait works the same way, but if you succeed, the subject can be made to do anything not intrinsically against their nature. In order to do such a thing, the target may make another roll with a +3 bonus to resist. If they fail the second test, they will comply with the hypnotist. No matter what, they cannot be hypnotized into killing themselves. The survival instinct is too strong. The special version costs 3 points and effectively allows the character to possess another person through complete and total mind control, with the hypnotist actually leaving their body to inhabit the victim. This level is reserved for alien or special characters and not for normal players. So there's quite a lot of variation between traits as well as different levels of some of them, which again, there's a lot of scope in here to differentiate your characters from one another. You can have resourceful pockets, which can help you find things in the nick of time, run for your life, so you're good at running away from danger, you get a bonus to your speed when you're being pursued. You could be a screamer, you can be technically adept, which helps you use technology. You could be a time traveler, which you can buy more than once because it's got an asterisk. You may be awarded this trait anyway during play if you become familiar with a certain tech level. So there's more on that later in the book. You could be tough, you get the voice of authority. Now we got our bad traits. So you could have an adversary. You have a minor or major enemy, basically, they're coming after you. So the Daleks, for example, would be a major bad enemy because they're really terrible. A minor adversary might be just a singular person or individual or alien that you've managed to piss off in your journeys throughout the space-time continuum, so a little bit less of a problem than a major adversary. Remember, when you buy these bad traits, you get character points back you can use for positive things, so that's always the balance you need to try and strike. You could have amnesia, again, it could be minor or major. You could have argumentative, which is just a minor bad trait that gives you certain negatives at crucial moments in ingenuity and resolve rolls. You could be too by the book, you could be clumsy, you could have a code of conduct, which restricts your behavior in certain circumstances. You could be cowardly, so if you want to try and resist fear, you get penalties for that. You could have a dark secret, which could be brought forward at some critical time in the story and lead to you being arrested or other bad things happening to you. You could have a dependency on something, maybe like a drug or certain kind of bodily fluids from another creature, or, it just gets in the way if it's a minor trait. But if it's a major trait, then you can't survive without it. So you need to make sure that you feed upon this substance, whatever it is, with a certain period of time defined by the game master in combination with the player. Otherwise, you get a -2 penalty to every action and take 1 point of damage each time you try to do something. You could be distinctive, which means you can't blend in very well. You could be eccentric, which could be off-putting to people, basically, for social interactions. You could be forgetful, which you can't take with the photographic memory trait, of course. You could have impaired senses, which could be minor or major, or taken more than once. So you could have different senses that are impaired, not just one. You could be impulsive. You could have insatiable curiosity, which can get you into trouble. You could be obligated to someone, and again, it could be a minor or major obligation. So you could be just part of a normal organization, as if it's a minor trait, and you kind of you help them out, but you're not risking your life all the time or anything like that. If it's a major trait, the organization is more important than you are, and you'll have to sometimes lay down their life for you, and if you're disobedient, it could be a huge problem. You could have a minor or major obsession with something that could be absolutely crazed if you spot it or if it interferes with you in some way. You could be an outcast. You could owe a favor to somebody, and you could take it multiple times and owe multiple favors. You get multiple phobias as well, which are a minor bad. So if you see the subject of your phobia, you get -2 penalty on any attempt to approach the subject of the phobia or stay calm in the vicinity of it. And the brave trait doesn't help, so you just have to deal with the phobia separately from that. So as I said, you could be brave about everything except whatever your phobia is. You could also be a bit selfish, which is a minor bad. You could have slow reflexes, which could be minor or major, depending on how slow you want to be. You could be technically inept, but you can't do that if you have boffin or technically adept. You could be unattractive, which obviously you can't take attractive at the same time. So if you're trying to use your good looks, you're going to get a penalty on that. You could be unlucky. If you roll 2 6s on your dice, you'd normally cheer, as this would be a huge success. But if you're unlucky, you have to re-roll, increasing the chance of rolling something worse. That really sucks. That really doesn't feel good. You could have a weakness. So an Achilles heel, possibly literally, that can be exploited by their enemies to harm or corrupt them. Major weakness is best suited for villains and aliens. You don't really want that for player characters because, if somebody exploited it, you might just be taken out of the game too quickly. And then you have special traits. So these are things like being an alien. So you're from another planet. You could have a really alien appearance, and that's a bad trait. It can be worth either 2 points or 4 points, depending on how gross you look. You could have clairvoyance, which means you're psychic. You can see other locations without being there or having to rely on technology. And it's kind of an inbuilt thing. You could be a cyborg, so it has a permanent gadget that will not run out of power or get lost. The cybernetic parts of the character are obvious and almost impossible to hide if you spend 1 point. If you spend 2 points, they're obvious but possibly concealable. For 3 points, the cybernetic elements are completely disguised under plastic but realistic looking skin. Major cybernetic overhauls such as Cyberman's are not really suitable for a character except at the Game Master's discretion. They always give the Game Master discretion. You could be experienced, but you could take more than once. Reduces the maximum story point total, but provides the character with an additional 2 character points and 2 skill points to use a character creation. So you can only take this at character creation. You'd also be fast healing. You could have a fear factor. And here we have one of the sleepy angels. They are pretty terrifying. It's only suitable for villains. Costs 1 point, but can be purchased multiple times. Each purchase adds +2 to any roll when actively trying to strike fear into people's hearts. You can feel the turn of the universe. So that's the clarity and the wonder that comes from viewing the whole of time and space through the untempered schism. This is only available to Time Lord characters and a few rare aliens. Now we have hypnosis again. We have immortal, so you have to be an alien to be immortal. You can't be a human and have that. You can be inexperienced with the opposite of experience, so you get a malus instead of a bonus. Last of my kind, which is the doctor's situation. So the depression of knowing they're completely alone when they're traveling alone gives you a minus penalty on every action unless their life is being threatened. So that's why the doctor always travels with companions. It's too depressing to know that you're the last of your kind. You never speak to another Time Lord like you again. You can have precognition, so you can see the future in dreams or other kinds of premonitions. You can be psychic, so you can enter other people's minds. And once you have this trait, then you can also be highly resistant to mental probing and possession and take a +4 bonus to any attempts on those kind of things. You can be a robot. Here we have the scary guys from the episode where Britain is flying in space. I forget the name of it. Starship Britain is policed by these horrible robot things. You could have telekinesis, which requires that you be psychic first. And you can use a resolve to lift an object instead of using your strength, which can be very handy. Then we give a nice little table of telepathic range depending on what your resolve value is. You can have telepathy to speak to people through their minds. Again, you have to be psychic to have that. You can be a time agent. So there are special operatives of the Time Agency, a shadowy group performing undercover espionage work involving time travel. Little is known of them, only that their operations span the entire universe and all of time. They're usually equipped with vortex manipulators and bounce through time to their assignments. So the vortex manipulator is 51st century technology at tech level 8. They gain the vortex trait and will usually have vortex manipulator, which allows them to communicate, time travel, and interact with computer technology. This costs 2 character points and 2 story points. The amnesia trait might also be a good purchase because after each mission they tend to wipe your memory. Then we have the Time Lord special trait, the rarest and most special of all special traits. So this gives the character all the abilities of a Time Lord. They can regenerate, they automatically gain Code of Conduct, feel the turn of the universe and vortex traits, gain 2 levels of ingenuity, even if this takes them above 6. They also gain a major gadget at no extra cost, and the Game Master will decide if they have access to a TARDIS or not. They'll also have a couple of bad traits, and they're usually mildly telepathic, and you may wish to purchase psychic and telepathy traits for the Time Lord. So this special trait costs 4 character points and reduces the character's maximum story points by 4, and there's more rules about regeneration and Time Lords and TARDISes later on. You can also be an experienced Time Lord, so you'll be an older regeneration. You'll gain 4 additional skill points and an additional time traveler trait for a different time period. The vortex trait, so you're experienced with time vessels, basically, gives you some help when you're in that situation. And then we have our skills. So these are your areas of expertise. There's a simple list of 12 skills, basically. A skill of 1 indicates a character with some basic knowledge. A skill of 2 or 3 is quite confident. If it's an academic skill, they may be quite reliable in the area. A skill of 4 or 5 is really showing expertise. At 6 or more, you're talking experts, doctors or masters, meaning not the doctor or the master. Their skills are obviously higher than that. Just as you did with the attributes, you have a number of points to divide up between the skills. Then we have different areas of expertise. And then we talk about the skills in more detail and what kind of areas of expertise they give you. Some things will be common knowledge. That will also depend on the sort of time origin, the era that you're from. If you're a time agent, you come from the 51st century, you'll have more different areas of common knowledge than somebody from the 21st century. We have the marksman skill for guns, medicine, science, subterfuge for tricking people, which includes also things like lockpicking, disguise, all that kind of stuff. So we have an example here of a character, Miles. So he's got 18 points to put into skills, and he's already decided that his character is more nimble and brained than strong. So he decides that athletics 2 will be handy for dodging those aliens, and knowledge 3, science 4, and technology 3 will make him quite knowledgeable. So that's 13 points spent so far, leaving 5 to spread through the other skills. So he spends relatively widely, and he takes a specialization in technology with computers. So 16 points plus 2 for 2 areas of expertise for 18 total. So there you go. And then we have our story points. Depending on your traits, you will start with 12 points, but some of the special traits will reduce the maximum story points because the presence of the trait itself will affect the story of the game. So they give you less points to manipulate the narrative. Then you do your finishing touches, so the name, appearance, background, etc. Their home time period and technology levels. So most characters are modern day Earth, which is level 5. River Song from the 51st century, so she'd have a home time period is 51st century, tech level 8. Doctor is a Time Lord, so he has Gallifrey, tech level 10. And they give you the tech levels over here. Number 1 means you're a primitive Stone Age person. 10 is a Time Lord. 11 is an Ancient Time Lord. And 12 is Beyond Comprehension, so abilities available only to the Eternals. Not playable characters, really. Then we think of some equipment and personal items people will have. And if you want to start with an unusual item of equipment, there are special rules for specific stuff like major items like a sonic screwdriver. They will require a spend or a decrease in your story points, for example, but you will be able to start with those. With certain traits, certain other traits will give you a minor item or major item like a vortex manipulator or what have you. And then you're ready to go. And then we have the basic rules. So they have a nice example here. Trapped in the 21st century Colchester by a mysterious force, the Doctor has to build a scanner. The task is obviously going to require a bit of genius, so ingenuity is the appropriate attribute. Doctor also has the technically adept trait, and this gives him +2 to rolls to fix or build machinery. This one combined with an ingenuity of 5 and technology skill of 5 gives him a whopping score of 16 right out of the gate. He rolls 2 dice, gets a score of 7, adds that to 16 to get 23, and this beats the difficulty that was set at 18. With characters like Time Lords, you get quite high numbers just by adding your attribute and your skills together. And then you might get bonuses from your traits as well, as we did in this case. So you can beat quite high difficulty numbers. However, if you want to attempt something without the skill, then you get a -4 penalty if you have absolutely no skill in that area. If you have a skill that would help a little but isn't totally related, then you might get a penalty of -2 instead. So generally, you don't want to attempt something without a skill because you're very unlikely to succeed, especially if the difficulty is any sort of significant number. And then they give you levels of success and failure. So this is really good as well. The level of success is important. If you roll 9 or more above using the standard, attribute plus skill plus 2d6, and you get 9 or more above the target, then the result is fantastic. You succeed and good things happen. Or if you're fighting, you get damage times 1.5. If you get 4 to 8 above, it was a good result. So you succeed and you get normal damage. If you're 0 to 3 above, just a regular success. It's yes, but it's not all good. So there might be some minor problem and your damage is halved. If you're 1 to 3 below is a failure. So you didn't succeed, but it's not all bad. So something slightly good happened and your damage is still halved. If you're 4 to 8 below, it's a bad result. You didn't succeed at all. Your damage that you're taking, for example, would be times 1. 9 or below would be disastrous. No and bad things happen. So you fail and something terrible happens. So the example here is that the character gets a cloning machine stuck in a high gear, causing it to spit out an army of Sontaran warriors. The gadget backfires, has the opposite effect, or the enemy enact their plans before it is ready. So there you go. That's the basic dice mechanic, and it works throughout the whole game. So then another way to deal with incredibly hard tasks is to work at it over a period of time. So this is kind of an extended task. There's an optional rule for the drama die as well. You could basically have a different colored die that you add to all of your rolls, and then the drama die result determines your level of success. So if you're trying to succeed at something, the roll will be regular success on a 1, good on 2 to 5, fantastic on a 6, and reverse effectively on the bad side if you're resisting something. But it's a bit more random, and honestly, it's really not difficult to do the maths to get the success level, so I would just do that. And also, of course, you have the story point. So if you imagine this as kind of a ladder of success, then you can spend a story point per rung to move up the ladder. So you can turn a regular success into fantastic by spending 2 story points, for example. Of course, if you're low on story points, then you can turn a success into a failure to regain story points. So that can be useful depending on what point of the story you're in and how major the task is. Sometimes you want to fail, so you'll have some story points in the bank to help you in the narrative later. Then we have some examples of contested roles and how they work, which again is really, really simple. Extended conflict. And this here I love. So Doctor Who has never been about violence. The Doctor doesn't shoot people, doesn't kill people, really not into that at all. And they encode that really into the rules. So if you go into an extended conflict where people might be shooting each other, the initiative order is strict that the talkers go first. So talking or shouting is proved to be very important in the Doctor's adventures, words being far more powerful and usually quicker than weapons. So before anyone starts shooting or anything blows up, you get to talk first. So the talkers go first. If your action is going to be a move, so you're going to run away, then you get to do that next. After that, you have the doers who are just going to perform an action not related to combat. So maybe you're not dealing with the enemy, but you're trying to open a door or rewire a circuit or whatever, hack a computer, then you would do that. The very last people to go are the fighters. So those are the people who were trying to fight. So by that point, you've been talked to, people are running away if they want to, people have done stuff to try and stop you, and then you finally get to try and shoot them. So it really disincentivizes being a fighter, because everybody else gets to go before you, and it really encourages you to try other things, other actions to try and do something. So, and they give some nice examples here. So, if you want to argue, then you would do your reaction if you're trying to resist a roll. So each person tries to take their action and is resisted by the target of their action using a suitable skill. So, for example, an arguing action would be resisted by ingenuity plus convince. Convincing somebody would be reduced by resolve and convince. Intimidating would be resolve plus convince again. If somebody's trying to fight you, then it could be awareness plus coordination or fighting, depending on whether you're trying to dodge or fight back. If somebody's trying to sneak around, you would do awareness plus awareness. If it's a hacking task, you want to resist it, then you need awareness or coordination plus tech. And there are rules here as well for taking more than one action in a round. So that means if you want to talk and run, or if you want to run and then do something, you'll take a -2 penalty for each additional action. For reactions, you can make more than one reaction roll in a round, but in many cases you don't actually need to. So once you start dodging, you're kind of harder for everyone to shoot at regardless. You don't need to dodge every single shot. If you have to react to anything in a round, you roll as normal with any necessary penalties, and that reaction roll counts for every attempt against you in that round. If you're being shot at and you react, then you set the difficulty for them trying to hit you with your dodge. That's going to be the same result for everybody else that shoots you for the rest of the round. However, if you do that after having done, say, a talking action and a doing action, then that dodge action would come last at a -4 because he's done 2 other actions first in this example. And then you start over at the top of the initiative order, and so they give you the summary. So first, the GM establishes the scene. Where is everyone? What's the environment like? What's everybody planning to do for the round? So that's where you choose, are you going to talk, run, do, or fight? And then everybody does their action in order of what they're planning on doing. An action is directed at another character can be resisted as they occur, and if that doesn't resolve the conflict in that round, then you start again at the top of the order and go again. And they give loads of examples of this, including scanning actions. Here, people are trying to convince somebody of something with charming. There's some tips for the game master here on basically making losing exciting. So that's, for example, if you might want to bring yourself down on the success ladder to failure to regain story points, make it interesting and fun for the player to do that. Using a physical conflict, basically, such injuries can be prevented with careful expenditure of story points in general. Sometimes the injury is so small that there's no heavy paperwork involved. If the injury is severe enough, you may find that one or more of the character attributes are reduced. It should be logical to the story and to the event which attribute is down. So, for example, if you fall a distance and fail to land, you can result in a loss of coordination or possibly strength from a leg injury. Getting shot would mean you lose strength, coordination, or resolve. In most cases, the game master will decide which attributes are selected, and all sources of injury, whether they are weapons, poisons, or worse, will have a value attached to them. These is usually a number, or in some cases, S or L. So you'll have numerical values. So they'll be presented in a kind of // format, and that represents the damage taken at each level of success. If you get a stun result, an S in the damage of the weapon, that means the target is knocked unconscious on a successful roll. If the game master allows, they may be able to perform one last heroic act, such as shout a warning into the radio, press the button that opens the doors, or something else quick and simple. How long they're unconscious will depend on how badly they've been injured. Normal stun lasts for around 15 minutes per level of success or failure. Now, lethal weapons have an L, so those are terrible things like Dalek death rays, particle cannons, blasters, all that kind of stuff. So on an ordinary success or failure, the character escapes instant death, and the L should be treated as a number, albeit a high and use suitably dangerous one, which is usually given. Otherwise, story points are your only chance for survival. Lethal damage should be treated against non-living or relatively massive targets like buildings, vehicles, or dinosaurs as having a rating of 4, 9, 13. Here we have some poor guy being zapped by a Dalek, I think. Then we have fighting damage. This is all about how strong you are, basically. Shooting is a different case, so it's more about the weapons. And then they give some tips. First of all, guns are bad. Agreed. They tend to be really, really deadly. They're dangerous. The bad guys will often use them, but there are many ways to try and stop them from pulling the trigger because lethal damage is pretty lethal in this game. And then they give you some tips on avoiding combat, so planning ahead, hiding, sneaking, talking people down, using a distraction, running away, getting rid of the guns or other weapons somehow, calling the police or other authorities like the time agents or whatever unit, whoever you can. You can surrender. You can dive for cover. You can use body armor or other things to try and reduce damage. And then they give you a list of the key marksman weapons here. So lasers have the dreaded L here. And then we have most are just regular kind of guns. We've got the protection and damage values for different types of cover and for different types of armor. So those will reduce the damage that you take if you're shot at successfully. Of course, there are other types of injuries that are detailed in the Game Master's Guide. Ooh. Scary, scary angel there. Then we have losing mental conflict. So this is mental damage that's applied to your ingenuity or resolve instead of the strength attribute. So you can get scared by something, like these horrible things or that horrible thing. There's a lot of scary things in Doctor Who, actually. Once the character is scared, they'll remain so until the creature is left, they're safe distance away from it, or another person can use a talking action, try and convince them to overcome their fear by making a presence plus convince roll against the creature's resolve plus presence plus fear factor. If there are no friends around to help, they may spend a story point each round to retake the resolve and ingenuity test to try and overcome their fear. So it really does help to have your friends around you supporting you. Isn't that nice? You can also be possessed, which is not great. You can be under the thrall of a psychic, alien, or some other type of mind-possessing creature. Losing a social conflict, that just means that typically, you'll be trying to resolve a debate or calm somebody down or whatever, and you'll fail to do so. You will take a sort of damage, and that could lead to you getting bad traits, for example, or hurting your pride or social standing. But, it's a social side effect rather than a physical side effect or a mental side effect. And there's some rules for healing, what to do with multiple injuries and reduced attributes. So if you have 0 in any of your attributes, you'll be incapacitated in a particular way. For example, if you lose all your resolve, you'll give up defeat and just sort of lie around like a sludge. Meanwhile, if you have 0 coordination, you will flail around, trip over the slightest thing, and just sort of sit down in the fetal position and hope to recover. Then we have dying or leaving the TARDIS. So those are different ways you can leave the story. And then some more info on story points. So these can help you. Basically, if you spend a story point when you're stuck on a mystery, the game master can give you a subtle clue or some event that nudges you in the right direction. For a particularly vital action, you can spend more than 1 story point to add an extra 6-sided die for each additional story point spent. So if you spend 3 story points, you get 2 extra dice from the first point and another one from the second 2 points. So you'd roll 4 extra dice. It must be a desperate action that requires that many dice. It's an optional rule and could result in some very high rolls. But that's why they give you 6 dice in the box, you see. You can also use your story points to improve the results of the rolls we've seen before. They can be used to restore injuries. Every story point restores half rounded up of the attribute levels that have been lost due to injury or losing a conflict. You can also use a story point to use the skill rating of the person who instructed you on using something you're not normally skilled at. There's lots of cool things you can do with story points. Yeah, they lay out a few more. I won't spoil all of them because it is quite a bit of fun. And then you can get awarded story points by completing tasks, doing something exciting or dramatic, playing in character, just good role-playing basically. And also you can get story points back, as we mentioned before, by voluntarily failing a task. And the level of failure will give you back the requisite number of story points that you go down the ladder. Then, of course, you can lose story points if you do bad things like killing people, or if you don't negotiate very well, and if you kill someone unnecessarily, you will lose all of your story points. And if it was done in a particularly cold-hearted way, the game master may even deduct half of all the other players' story points too, if they were in a position to stop you and didn't. So then we have some stuff about equipment, tech levels, and once again, a summary of the different technology levels. And now we have some hints and tips for your first game. So, don't worry about the rules too much, but don't cheat, roll the dice properly and try and do the right thing. Try not to metagame too much. So that's when you as a person know more than the character could possibly know in the game. So, try not to use that to influence your character decisions. Make sure to really put character into your character, get involved with them. Basically, don't make your character in such a way that it can make people uncomfortable. That's good advice for any role-playing game. And then don't hog the spotlight. So, if you're playing the Doctor, be conscious that you are a major being that a lot of people hate or know, or, you're kind of famous throughout space and time, but don't use that as a reason to hog all the spotlight at the table. Make sure to share out the adventure and the fun with everybody. And their final bit of advice is, what would the Doctor do? Just keep asking yourself that question. Recurring themes for the game should be about a sense of adventure, drive to move forward and experience all there is to see out there, looking at the good, the bad, and the ugly, and learning to investigate things, getting curious and exploring mysteries. What's happening to things around you? Why are strange things occurring? Well, let's find out. Then the indomitable human race, who as a whole have had an outsized influence on space and time, despite being a relatively minor planet. And then making a difference. And the pacifism, as we mentioned before, is really a theme of the game, basically. Like, if you're playing at least as a Doctor and his companions, there are lots of alternatives to fighting, and the game enforces those mechanically, so make sure that you use those. And then we have yet another example of the lovely character sheet on the back here. So that's the player's guide, which gives you the basic rules. Now we have a contents on the back of the Game Master's Guide, which, again, sorry for the reflection, slightly unusual. I'm not going to spoiler too much of these because we'll have a flip through each of the sections so you can see the basics, but there's a lot of cool stuff in here that you should discover as a player, so I don't want to spoil too much of that for you. First off, we have tips, on the sort of meaning of different levels of attributes, which is useful for the game master to know. We have a master trait list, which will have the traits that characters can use, as well as ones that are for aliens only. So you remember this guy. That was quite an interesting episode, that one. Then we have the skill list, some tips on encouraging role play in character versus just relying on roles without really stating what your character will do or what they're up to, what they're thinking or feeling. Then we have the areas of expertise available. Once again, tech levels and story points. So it's pretty much restating, but then we also have an example non-player character. So essentially NPCs are created using the same rules as a regular PC. They give you some ideas in this chapter, again, about, how to run a game, essentially. So a reminder of the basic mechanics, which skill or attribute to use, and then some advice on task ratings, which is really helpful. So above 30 is where you're getting really crazy. That's like, rebooting the universe, which of course the Doctor has done, but, you really have to have a lot on your side to make that work. Story points, of course, can affect that stuff. And then we go through the levels of success, the optional rule of the drama die, some complications. So these are things that you could throw at the players to make things a little bit more interesting, not just, here's the thing, roll against the target number. But, maybe there's a little bit of an advantage. You've snuck up on the enemy, or maybe there's poor lighting, or you're getting chased, or maybe you're trying to do more than one thing at once, or the target's in a vehicle, you're fighting in pitch blackness. They could give you all different kinds of penalties to your rolls. Then there's some advice about, of course, the basics of conflict are revisited, but also, making things more interesting, working out damage, and also there's an optional sort of hit location table, which I find really useful. So roll 2d6, you can get hit in the leg, body, arm, or head, and it'll tell you which attribute could be affected as well. The head notably can affect any attribute because the brain is the center of our consciousness, our being. So that's makes some sense. And then we have, again, the summaries of basic armor types, cover types, and weapons. Other sources of injury, including cold and heat. We've got our healing stuff, terrain modifiers for movement, and we have chase rules. Chasing is a big part of Doctor Who. You'll see that happen a lot, so it's good to have specialized rules for that. Then there are story point guidelines here on, how much you should require or expect from players for really climactic events or less consequential events, and a reminder of how to spend story points and how things can go crazy, and some advice on giving out and losing story points. Then growing from the experience. So with exercise, practice, and dedication, a character's attributes can increase, but usually no more often than once in a dozen adventures. So it's basically up to the GM whether increases in attributes are appropriate, because people don't suddenly get smarter overnight. It has to be something that, has really changed you over a long period of time. And also remember that normal humans can never go above 6 in an attribute. Aliens or extraordinary people can go above 6, but it's very rare. You can also potentially get rid of bad traits by changing your behavior in your role play, or you can buy good traits by succeeding at certain things. As you go through the game, you might change your personal goal. You might manage to increase your story points if you were particularly brave, or had great and dramatic storytelling, or if you're growing as a person. Then there's some more info about boys and their toys. So now we get into vehicles, some more stuff about gadgets, both minor and major, special gadgets and making them using jiggery pokery. Then we have information about gadget traits, which is good for the GM to adjudicate what all the different gadgets can do. And then we have an example of play. And here we have Games Master's guidance to time travel, basically trying to deal with weird things that can happen when you change time, paradoxes, the antibodies of space-time, the Reapers. So they effectively prevent paradoxes and changes caused by time travel from going out of control. So if you try to do a paradox, you may end up dealing with these very nasty people, the Reapers. Well, not people, but things. Then there's some more info about time travel, including ripple and nexus points. The idea of predestination. So can time be changed? The show says yes. So, run with it, basically. Can you go sideways in time? That would be kind of traveling to separate universes or alternate universes. And it does seem that is possible, but not always a good idea. And it can also be a one-way trip if you're not careful. And one of the rules of the Doctor, of course, is that time is not the boss of you. So time being fluid allows the game master a lot of ways to kind of get around worries about fate and predestination and all that kind of problematic stuff, and give the players a lot of freedom to mess about with timey-wimey stuff. There's also a great supplement called the Time Travel's Companion, which we'll look at in a future video. It talks all about this in a lot more detail, as well as giving you a much more robust system for creating TARDISes and telling you, having them actually work in gameplay. Then we have info about Time Lords, how regeneration works, Again, there's some kind of spoilers around here, so I won't go too much into that. We got information on TARDISes, how they work, the key devices that they contain, how they manipulate energy, their level of sentience, and actually stats for this TARDIS as seen in the 11th Doctor's universe. Then we have some more information about how the TARDIS travels through the time vortexes, and basically the TARDIS can kind of sometimes act on its own or become part of an adventure itself, so don't be afraid to do that as a GM. And now we have, again, spoilery stuff, but lots of cool adversaries, which we've seen in the 11th series. We've got the Nestine, the Atraxi, duplicates, Cybermen, of course the Daleks, which are very scary, and a lot of details on each of them as well. So it's not just stats, you're getting, backgrounds about these races, who they are, why they do what they do, explaining their traits and so on. We've got the Jadoon, Saturninians, which are the vampire fish guys, if you remember them. Then we have the Silurians, who once used to be in charge of the Earth, and they've got special traits, including a tongue attack, which is always fun. The Smilers and the Winders. Yeah, that guy really would scare the crap out of me if I was a kid. The Centaurans, so they're formidable and determined and militarized aliens. We've got the Sycorax, who are also pretty lethal and scary looking. The Weeping Angels, who are still like one of the greatest adversaries, I think, in Doctor Who, especially in the modern era. Just fantastic, because they've got the quantum locking ability, which is very cool. And you can also have aliens as player characters, and here's some more ideas for alien traits, like additional limbs, alien senses, armor, climbing. You could be enslaved as a bad trait. You could have environmental, which means you can exist in strange or harsh environments. Lots of cool stuff here. You could possess people. You could be networked. You could have fear factor, which is really only for villains. Natural weapons, a lot of aliens have those. Shape-shifting, teleportation, the vortex trait, again, your experience with time travel. Alien flora and fauna can sometimes be interesting. And then, basically tips on generally being a game master. So you're in the hot seat, so you should be prepared, but also be flexible. And there's some nice hot tips here with a saucy-looking river song reinforcing those for you and reminding you to compliment the characters, keep the story going, give people appropriate amounts of spotlight and so on. A handy list of technobabble phrases. I need to anti-flux the dimensional graviton manipulator. Go! I'd like it if it was a table, like in Star Trek Adventures, but, close enough. Then there are, dealing with problematic aspects in players, so power gamers, but often I think power gamers are not bad. I mean, they're just people that know the rules and try to, to use them to your advantage, basically. That's not necessarily a bad thing. They keep you on your toes. They're generally people who want to really engage with the game as a game, and that's not a bad thing. We just have to make sure it stays under control and they don't try to, go against theme and the Doctor Who universe in so doing. The metagamer, that's a problem we mentioned before, where, you give your character information they couldn't possibly have. Some people, you could be people who are too quiet, they're just spectating, or people who just straight up cheat. The rule monger, which we would know as the rules lawyer. But if somebody really likes looking up rules, then you could kind of elect them to be your assistant and make it a sort of a thing that they get rewarded for, just rather than saying, look, let me do my thing. Allow them to have their fun with the rules and give them an official reason to do it. And just basically, you're in charge of the game. So they give a nice example here of adjudicating things, which is helpful. Being a beginning GM is scary. You have to be in charge of a lot of people's fun. And people are very quick to blame bad GMing for problems when bad players can be a problem too. So then there's some tips here on setting up longer story arcs. Anything from, 2 to 3 episode stories to long campaigns, personal story arcs for characters, and then a master chase grid for the chase rules. And there you go. So that is our first look at the first edition of Doctor Who, Adventures in Time and Space. What we'll look at next time is some of the supplements, and we'll also take a look at the next iteration of the game, where the rules are unchanged, essentially, but just compiled into a lovely hardcover book with the inherently grumpy face of Peter Capaldi on the front. And it's a lovely book, a little bit more sort of rugged than this box set, but it does include all this handy stuff like dice and story point tokens and all that. So you need to make your own way with those. But so I hope you enjoyed that. Doctor Who, of course, is a great show, a classic for the BBC for all these decades. And the role-playing game is simple, but simple in a way that'll be happy and familiar for experienced gamers who love the 2d6 plus attribute plus modifier system. Just extending that. Plus you've got this narrative element, which is very popular in games these days, to have a kind of meta currency to help you up the drama and up the stakes in different scenarios. So it's a great game, less simple than you might think at first glance. There's a lot of interesting things you can do with it. And once you work in the huge number of supplements, including really detailed supplements for every single Doctor, there's a huge amount to this game, and I hope to show you just a little bit of that during this tribute to the 60th anniversary of the wonderful Doctor Who franchise. So I hope you enjoyed that. Look forward to more on this edition of the game and its supplements coming soon. Eventually we'll work our way up to the second edition, which is still backwards compatible with just minor changes. So anything you get for edition 1 or the kind of 1.5 revised core books, it all works pretty seamlessly together, so don't worry about it. Anything I show you that you like the look of, just go ahead and buy it and it should work for you. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think in the comments if you have any questions about the game system, and I'll be back soon with more videos on Doctor Who and his adventures throughout time and space. And until then, take care and see you soon. Bye-bye.